tiny hole into the soda can and cut the top steel layer off, inserting a photographic paper before sealing and covering it with tape. Next, place the can in front of your desired spot, allowing the beam of light to enter through the tiny hole, and as the days pass, it projects an upside-down image onto the paper. The tiny hole is again carefully sealed with tape until the paper is removed in complete darkness, revealing the exact photograph of the desired spot. Punch a tiny hole into the soda can and cut the top steel layer off. Can standing still in front of a dinosaur actually save your life? You see, a T-Rex's eyeballs were the size of a grapefruit and faced forward, which gave them a wide field of view and helped them spot prey even from several miles away. And even if you try to freeze, your heartbeat would shake slightly and move your chest. And a real predator would notice this at a close range, proving the Jurassic Park myth wrong. Can standing still in Why do Special Forces soldiers place a hand on the shoulder of the man in front when standing in a line? You see, this is called stacking, where touch is used to communicate. A light push means move, a pull means stop, a tap signals readiness, and if the soldier in front is hit and goes down, the teammate behind him already has contact, so he can grab him and pull him immediately out of danger. Why did World War II soldiers carry tiny canary cages into the battlefield? You see, when troops entered sealed bunkers, the air inside was filled with deadly fumes from old stockpiles and shell residues, and canaries reacted instantly to toxic air, collapsing long before humans felt symptoms, giving soldiers just enough time to retreat before they suffocated. Why would Viet Cong soldiers tie a live grenade to their own flagpole? You see, after clearing the village, US troops would often rush to tear down enemy flag and raise their own as a symbol of victory, a habit the Viet Cong quickly noticed. And to counter this, they began wiring grenades to the flag rope, and the moment US Marines pulled out the flag to take it down, a massive blast would destroy the entire troop. Why would Viet Cong When a predator starts chasing a quokka mother, it will throw her baby right on the ground. You see, when a quokka is threatened, it relaxes the muscles of its pouch, causing the joey to fall out and squeal loudly. And that sudden distraction gives the mother a crucial head start to escape because, in the quokka's harsh ecosystem, the survival of the mother comes first, as she can reproduce again and ensure the species survives. When a predator starts chasing a quokka mother, it will throw her baby right on the ground. Scammers would intentionally add red chili powder in large quantities to the free food sample, and the moment you taste the free food, it makes your mouth burn, and a sudden desperation for water arises. That's when the scammer calmly explains there's no free water and offers to sell you a bottle at an outrageous price. The best way to avoid this scam is to take the free bite and then pull out your own water bottle. The guards would start by placing bricks under the feet of the prisoner. Next, they would tie the accused to the bench with his legs stretched straight out in front, and the Chinese guards would gradually increase the number of bricks one at a time, raising the legs higher, and as the stack grew, the ropes around their knees and thighs pulled tighter, twisting the joints in ways they were never meant to move. The guards would start by placing bricks under the feet of the prisoner. Next, they would Why do Air Force workers drop tons of chicken meat from their plane directly into the city? You see, during the ceremony, fighter jets are expected to perform various stunts in the sky, but birds would always crash into the plane, leaving the pilot dead and people disappointed. So authorities drop tons of boneless chicken far from flight paths to lure carnivorous birds and reduce risk during the air show. Why would Nazi governments give gold medals to mothers having 8 kids or more? You see, this is a Golden Mother's Cross, given specifically to mothers with 8 kids, a silver medal was rewarded for 6 kids, and a bronze medal for 4 kids, as the main idea of the Nazi government was to boost the Aryan population and raise future soldiers and loyal citizens for the regime. Why would Nazi governments give gold medals to mothers having The Mangbetu tribal people would tightly wrap a newborn baby's head in cloth. As the baby grew, the cloth would force the skull to grow longer and more oval in shape over time, distinguishing them from other people. The Mangbetu people believed that a longer forehead indicated higher status, power, and wisdom. He laughed at his competitor, who was selling the printers at the same price he purchased them for. To make a profit, he kept his printer's price high, but as his competitor's price was low, his printers were sold out quickly, while his printers were still unsold. He was confused about how he made a profit on selling at cost price, but when the printer's ink was finished, people were left with no option but to buy the expensive ink, and the competitor who sold the printer at the cost price made heavy profits by just selling the ink. He laughed at his competitor, who was selling the printers at the same price he purchased them for. To make a profit, why do British soldiers avoid farting when hiding inside the trenches? You see, during World War I, British soldiers fighting in Turkey were stuck eating just turnips, beans, and animal fat, and those foods fermented aggressively in the stomach, causing uncontrollable gas, where a single sound and even the smell started giving away the soldier's position. Why do scientists place 2 parrots inside a glass box with a small hole in the front? Both parrots were then offered metal rings, and every time a parrot dropped the metal ring outside the cage, he was given a snack. Then the scientists gave one parrot a pile of 10 rings, and the other parrot got none. But when the rich parrot saw the other parrot missing food, he started pushing rings towards the other side through the gap until both parrots could pay and eat, solving the inequalities better than most people does. Scientists placed. Why do Soviet soldiers intentionally tilt their rifle at a perfect 60-degree angle during the parade? You see, in freezing cold in Soviet, the oil inside their rifles could thicken, which makes the firing pin stick just enough to set off a shot by accident. But holding the rifle at a ceremonial angle sent the bullet flying safely into the air and not into the marching soldiers. Why do Soviet criminals would intentionally scrub the $1 bills with bleach, leaving behind a blank currency paper? And once all the ink is removed, criminals then use a printer to print a $100 design on this special bank paper. And when a store clerk checks the note at a store, it'll pass the casual inspection, but if they looked closely, they would notice the lacking UV marks alerting the counterfeit currency units. Criminals. The dog snaps its leash and lunges at a schoolboy, knocking him hard to the ground. It doesn't bite or growl, it simply pins the boy down, refusing to let him get back up. And seeing this, people in the street start beating the dog with a stick, until the sealed manhole cover beneath where the boy had been standing exploded upward and released lots of gases due to the decomposing organic waste underground. The dog snaps its leash and lunges at schoolboy. Why do stall owners spin old CD above their food stalls? You see, when the food is kept in the open, it attracts customers with its smell, but they also attract flies, which can contaminate food and make people sick. So stall owners started hanging CD with strings that spun rapidly with a motor, producing a flashy reflection that scared away the mosquitoes without using chemical sprays. Why do stall U.S. soldiers would intentionally cut the strap of their helmets? You see, U.S. officers noticed that if soldiers were wearing the strap correctly during heavy artillery blasts, the tight chin straps would violently snap the head and jaw. So by leaving the strap unbuckled, the blast would simply fly the helmet away instead of breaking their head. U.S. soldiers would intentionally cut the strap of. If you see a person offering you a free camel ride in a tourist area, congratulations, you have just entered into a scam. Scammers in tourist areas would approach you and start offering you a free ride on their camel. And while you are enjoying the ride, they would slowly drift you away, taking you to their crew, where they will steal all your valuables. The best way to avoid this scam is the moment they offer a free ride, book an Uber XL and leave. If you see a person offering, U.S. soldiers would intentionally place American helmets on captured German soldiers. You see, when a German soldier surrendered, they were often transported to the American camps, but the Allied snipers were unaware of the German surrender, and snipers would shoot them, thinking them to be enemies. But by placing American helmets on German soldiers created an illusion for the snipers that American soldiers were just retreating back to the base. U.S. British sailors would intentionally carry a sack and a hammer while sailing in the sea instead of rifles. You see, early in World War I, German U-boats were sinking supply ships relentlessly, and Britishers realized the periscope was a critical weak point. So they started deploying sailors in small motorboats just to cover the periscope with sacks and smash it using a hammer, forcing the enemy to retreat. British sailors would intentionally carry a sack and a hammer while sailing in the sea instead of rifles. You see, early in World War I, German U-boats were sinking supply ships relentlessly, and Britishers realized the periscope was a critical weak point. So they started deploying sailors in small motorboats just to cover the periscope with sacks and smash it using a hammer. Start by cutting a square-shaped notch into the trunk of the tree. Next, make vertical cuts from the corners of the notch, leaving a thick strip of wood in the center to act as a hinge. Finally, when you cut the tree from just above the hinge, the tree begins to tip, and that wooden hinge guides the massive trunk to fall in a precise direction away from the house instead of crashing into it. Start by cutting a square-shaped notch into the tree. British soldiers would tie their ships to a wooden boat and leave them in the water. You see, the German soldiers would often lay magnetic mines in the water, which would detonate as soon as the British ships sailed over them. But when the British wooden boats passed through the magnetic mine, the main ship would pass electricity through the cable, creating a magnetic field and causing the magnetic mine to detonate, leaving the boat and the main ship undamaged. British soldiers would tie their ships to a wooden boat and leave. He really wanted a McDonald's burger, but at 2 a.m., with his parents asleep, the 8-year-old broke open his piggy bank, grabbed the car keys, and took his little sister along. And after watching a few driving videos on YouTube, he navigated through dark streets, obeyed traffic lights, and drove 2.5 kilometers without hitting a single thing. And when he rolled down the window at McDonald's, a stunned employee called 911, but since no harm was done, the parents were only warned and the kids got the burgers they wanted. How come Wonder Woman hides the God-Killer sword behind her back and walks without cutting herself? You see, the sword is roughly 80 centimeters long and looks razor-sharp, which made many viewers assume she would get sliced instantly. But weapons experts explained the mechanics. When a flat sword is carried at the correct angle, it rests on its spine, not its edge, so even a God-Killer blade won't cut through fabric or skin unless external pressure is applied. How come Wonder Woman? American soldier would intentionally break his leg and act dead on the battlefield. You see, Japanese soldiers would often prod their enemies' bodies with rifle butts in order to confirm their kill. But by breaking their leg in an unnatural angle and letting their face look slackened, allowed the soldiers to bluff the Japanese soldiers into thinking that they're already dead. American soldier would intentionally. They tied a black bear to a large tree and offered a rifle to President Teddy Roosevelt for an easy kill. But he shocked everyone by refusing to shoot a helpless animal, calling it unsportsmanlike, and ordering the bear released back into the wild. The story quickly made newspaper headlines, and a New York toy shop turned it into a plush called Teddy's Bear, giving birth to one of the most iconic toys of all time. Why do Russian soldiers cover their entire tank in cables, inspired by the shape of a hedgehog? You see, modern battlefields are saturated with drones, where cheap FPV drones can strike tanks from above. And these hedgehog-shaped cables deflect and detonates drones before any impact, and sometimes even leaving the drones tangled and stuck on top of the tank unharmed, so they can be analyzed later. Why do Russian soldiers cover their entire tank in cables, inspired by the shape of a hedgehog? You see, while crossing the bridge, the donkey's hoof slipped and it fell straight into the river, causing the sack of salt to dissolve in the water. Pleased with the result that there is no need to carry the heavy load now, the donkey tried the same trick the next day by deliberately falling into the river again. But this time, the sack contained cotton that soaked up the water, turning the load unbearably heavy, teaching that sometimes clever shortcuts can produce deadly outcomes. While crossing, the shopkeeper would intentionally chop a silver coin into 8 slices and hand over 2 pieces to the customer. You see, on the early American frontier, the most common currency was the Spanish silver dollar, but smaller coins for everyday transactions didn't exist. So people solved the problem by literally cutting the coin into 8 bits, where 2 bits equaled 25 cents, creating a legally accepted way to make small change. If you see a person standing too close to you on the subway, congratulations, you have just entered into a scam. Scammers in subway stations would stick to your back, and as soon as you place your card on the scanner, the gates would open, and he would enter the platform along with you without paying for the ticket, eventually getting you into trouble. The best way to avoid this scam is when you feel something close to your back, go for a low blow attack without thinking. If you see a person standing too close to you on the... Why did German soldiers try to shoot their own officers that were wearing shiny crescent chains? You see, those chains marked as the military police, who enforced discipline while enjoying better equipment, motorcycles, and safer postings behind the lines. But as the war dragged on, they began arresting and executing retreating soldiers and dragging wounded men back to the front. So these chain dogs were deeply hated and were often targeted by troop outrage. Why would the British soldier collect hot, boiling water released from a machine gun straight into a cup? During World War I, the British used the Vickers machine gun, which fired at an astonishing rate of 450 rounds per minute, with precision, causing the gun to overheat and become dysfunctional. And to prevent this, the barrel was wrapped in a water-cooling jacket that drew in cold water and released boiling hot water through an outlet, which soldiers famously used to brew tea right on the front lines. Why would the British soldier... Why did soldiers start firing bright lights from their gun instead of bullets? You see, this is a Phasar blinding gun, and when the soldier pressed the trigger, it closes an electrical circuit inside the gun, producing a laser beam so bright that it made the soldier dazzled, disoriented, and unable to aim or move forward, giving soldiers a head-on advantage in combat. Why did soldiers fix the candle into the stand, bending it at an angle of 60 degrees, then insert the wick straight into the holder, and as you lit the candle, the 60-degree tilt would cause the wax to melt and drip into the second column. The collected wax would slowly build up a second candle from the wax of the previous candle, allowing you to light the candle multiple times. Fix the candle into the stand, bending it at an angle of 60 degrees, then insert the wick straight into the holder, and as you lit the candle, the 60-degree German soldiers would intentionally remove the turret of the tank and attach two guns in front of it. You see, the idea was to remove the load of the turret and make a fast-moving tank, keeping a low profile on the battlefield. But the guns couldn't rotate, causing the driver to violently jerk the whole tank left and right to aim. And all this shaking made soldiers dizzy, nauseous, and literally throwing up during training. German soldiers would intentionally remove the turret of the tank and attach two guns in front of it. You see, the idea was to remove the load of the turret. 8 women would intentionally dress similarly to a royal bride and were forced to walk around the main bride with almost identical appearances. Back in ancient Rome, rival groups would often kidnap the royal bride from her wedding in order to gain political power. So these identical women existed to confuse attackers and protect the bride from kidnapping, evolving into the concept we today know as the bridesmaid. 8 women would Why do raccoons intentionally wash their food in water before eating? You see, raccoons have a high number of touch receptors in their front paws, and when they dip their paws in wet water, the nerve endings become much more sensitive, which allows the raccoon to detect the texture of the object and easily identify the food before eating. Why did British people start covering their windows with bricks? You see, in England, British royalty would collect the tax based on the number of windows in the house, as they believed more windows meant more wealth. So they started targeting rich homeowners with big, bright houses. And to counter this, landlords just bricked up the windows to avoid paying tax, leaving poor families in dark, airless rooms that literally lost their daylight. Why is the US flag reversed on army uniforms? You see, back in the days when the flag bearer charged forward, he kept the blue and white stars mounted closest to the pole, and the flag flew with the breeze, symbolizing the army was advancing forward. So if the flag was straight on the uniforms, it would mean soldiers were retreating to the base, and that's why keeping the flag reversed on the uniform symbolizes the troops were advancing forward in the battle. Why is the US flag reversed? If you see a person selling multicolored chicks in a tourist area, congratulations, you have just entered into a scam. Scammers in tourist areas would intentionally dip chicken babies into different color paint and start selling them on the street, saying that these are an extremely rare breed of chicken. But the moment you take these chicks back home, it starts losing its color, and the chicks would die from coloring within 2 to 3 days, leaving you sad and disappointed. The best way to avoid this scam is to throw a bucket of water on the scammer. If you see the Green Power Ranger broke his knee while shooting a stunt scene. Due to the budget constraints of the producer, he was forced to leave the show, and as the medical bills arose, he went completely broke. But while his shooting days at Power Rangers, he learned various flips and wall climbing techniques, and these skills he later used in breaking into second-floor balconies and clearing out cash and jewelry from 43 households before getting caught by the police. Why would soldiers climb onto the rooftops of their new commander and start jumping? You see, soldiers would intentionally stomp so hard on the commander's rooftop until the window and ceiling starts vibrating, leaving the commander with only one option to open the door, smiling and throw an instant party with whatever food and drinks they've got, celebrating his new recruitment. Why do Israeli soldiers exit tanks using a back door? You see, if you look at almost every tank in the world, the engine is always in the back. But due to limited resources by Israel, they moved the tank engine in front, turning the engine into a second layer of armor. And now with an empty space in the back, they installed a back door in the tank to allow the soldier to exit quickly in dangerous situations. Why do Israeli soldiers...
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Are you okay? I didn't mean to bump into you.
Yes, you?
Sorry about that.
US soldiers would intentionally squeeze super glue on the cuts of injured soldiers. You see, during the battle in Vietnam, soldiers would get badly injured, and soldiers didn't always have time or tools to stitch the wounded. But applying super glue on the open wounds would seal the cuts and stop the bleeding immediately, giving the medics enough time to carry the soldier to the recovery camp. Why would soldiers intentionally tie white cloth on the barrels of their rifle? You see, when soldiers wore the same shade of uniform on night missions, it made Allied soldiers' uniforms hard to differentiate, causing friendly fire among the soldiers. But tying a white cloth on the rifle's barrel acted as a rapid visual marker and prevented friendly fire when silhouettes looked identical. Why would soldiers If you see a child asking for help to find his parents in a tourist area, congratulations! You have just entered into a scam. Small kids in tourist area would hold your hand and pull you into the wood, convincing you it was the last spot where he met his mother. But the moment you step into the woods, the mob would surround you, eventually robbing you of your valuables. The best way to avoid this scam is to free your hand and run from the site as fast as possible. Why would the commander intentionally order the soldiers to stop marching? During the 19th century, bridges were often made of wood, and when the soldiers' footfall synced, it amplified the vibration, causing the bridge to collapse. To counter this, the commanders shouted the command "break step," signaling the soldiers to walk normally on the wooden bridge, allowing everyone to cross safely. Why would the commander intentionally order the soldiers to stop marching? During the 19th century, bridges were often made of wood. As she stepped into her house, she noticed her cat choking and crying for help. Thinking the animal had swallowed something, she rushed it to an emergency vet. But upon close examination, the vet discovered something horrifying. They found a part of a human ear inside the cat's throat and immediately called the police. The police then searched her apartment, and to their shock, they found a man lying unconscious in the shower tub behind the curtain. As she stepped into her house, she noticed her American soldiers would intentionally paint foxes with glowing paint and then release them into the forest. The idea was to use Japanese superstition about creatures, as the sight of glowing foxes sprinting through rice fields could create a mass panic among the Japanese soldiers and expose their location. But the foxes started licking the glowing paint, which made them sick. That's why the idea never caught on. American soldiers, while crossing the river, the dog noticed another dog clenching a bigger piece of meat in his jaws. Greedy and convinced he could have both the meats, the dog charged towards the other dog at full speed. But suddenly he fell straight into the river and lost his piece of meat in the river stream, only to realize it was just his own reflection in the river water, and he lost what he already had for being too greedy. While crossing, a Marine sniper intentionally duct tapes a hollow bamboo tube to his rifle scope and fits his modified binoculars in front of it. You see, a standard Marine scope maxes out at just 800 meters, and this was a real concern for Anderson as he watches Vietnamese commanders directing bombardment on their base through his binoculars. So Anderson started attaching his special bamboo tube in front of the Marine rifles, which doubled the magnification power, enabling Marine snipers to spot enemies from 1,700 meters away. A Marine sniper in... Why would German soldiers intentionally remove their pants in freezing snow? You see, during their mission in the extreme cold weather, German soldiers would often suffer from hypothermia, which created a psychological effect that their legs were burning up. And to counter this, soldiers would quickly rush into the snow and remove their pants and lie in the snow. But this worsened the hypothermia, as it dropped the body temperature even more, ultimately leading to cardiac arrest. Why would American soldiers would intentionally draw white lines over their planes? You see, German spies would secretly loosen the screws of the American plane, causing the parts of the plane to come loose in midair and crash during the flight. And to counter this, American soldiers drew white lines on the crucial joints of the plane. And if the white line was not perfectly straight, it meant the enemy soldier had secretly loosened the screws. American soldiers would Why is one soldier marching in British parade with full beard and a huge axe in his hand? Well, he is not there for decoration. Back in the days, pioneers marched at the front, chopping through woods, trees, or any obstacles that came in their way. And the long beard protected their face from sparks and splinters. Today, they march mostly for ceremonial purposes, but the beard and axe are still there, so you don't forget what his job used to be. Why do French duelists intentionally load bullets made of wax into the gun? You see, if you were insulted in public, French people believed only blood could restore your lost honor, and dueling with live bullets was considered illegal and murder. But firing wax bullets provided just enough impact to cause pain and draw the first blood as demanded by the formal duel combat. Why do French duelists intentionally load bullets made of wax into the gun? You see, if you were insulted in public, French people believed only blood could restore your lost honor, and dueling with live bullets was considered illegal and murder. But firing wax bullets provided just enough impact to cause pain and draw the first blood as demanded by the formal duel combat. As soon as the squirrel tries to climb the pole to steal food from the bird feeder, the spring attached to the pole makes the squirrel fall instantly. But with time, squirrels have got smarter as it learned to push the spring upward with its head and suddenly jump to the feeder. So homemakers started attaching a spinner to the feeder, and as the squirrel latches onto the feeder, it starts spinning so fast that the squirrel has only one option left to let go. As soon as the squirrel tries to climb the pole to steal food, if you see a baby flying and coming towards you in a tourist area, congratulations! You have just entered into a scam. Woman scammers in tourist area would intentionally bump into you and trip, where their baby goes straight into the sky and your instinct kicks in to catch and save the baby. And the moment you realize what just happened, people in the street start beating you up. The best way to avoid this scam is to control your instinct to catch the baby and run from the spot as fast as possible. If you see a baby as the chicken lays an egg, the farmer would steal it right away. You see, if the number of eggs in the nest is too low, the hen would keep laying eggs until the clutch feels complete. So farmers would cleverly remove a few eggs from the hen's nest, forcing the hen into thinking that the nest is still empty, and the hen would keep laying eggs until the clutch felt complete. As the chicken lays an egg, the farmer would... Why do Marine soldiers always carry a foam spray into combat zones? You see, enemy soldiers would intentionally attach a tripwire paired with explosives at the entrance of the gate, which is completely invisible to the naked eye. And to avoid getting bursted, Marine soldiers started spraying foam before entering the room, as the foam would sit perfectly on the tripwire, which reveals the presence of the hidden explosives inside the room. Why do Marine soldiers always carry a foam spray into combat zone? Why does the mounted figure on the cart always point towards the south direction? You see, inside the cart, both wheels were linked by a clever set of gears, and whenever the cart moved left or right, these gears would spin the figure in the opposite direction, keeping the statue's arm locked on south, which allowed the ancient Chinese people to navigate through the dense forests without getting lost. Why does one of Putin's hands look paralyzed when he starts walking? You see, Putin was a KGB officer for 16 years, and according to the KGB manual, officers walk with their left hand free while keeping their dominant right hand tucked closer to their body, as this reduces the reaction time to draw a sidearm when the officers were stuck in a dangerous situation. Why does one of Putin's hands look paralyzed? If you get a match in a tourist area, congratulations! You have just entered into a scam. Out-of-league girls would intentionally swipe you right on dating apps, and then they would call you at their desired restaurant for a date. And at the restaurant, she would keep ordering dish after dish until she hits her sales target, as restaurants have hired such females to boost their business. Then she would make an excuse to use the restroom, ultimately leaving you stranded to pay the massive bill. If you get a match in a tourist area, Why did US soldiers start chewing C4 explosives as if they were gum? You see, some US soldiers started biting off the C4 explosives as a part of a dare, showing that it would only detonate by a powerful shock. But the chemical buzz inside the C4 started triggering the brains of the soldiers, making them more addicted to the substance, resulting in vomiting and seizure, and some soldiers ended up in the emergency ward to prevent them from consuming more C4. Why did US soldiers start chewing C4? Why do movie directors intentionally stick a pen on a circular glass? You see, before CGI, creating floating objects in outer space shots was nearly impossible. But by attaching the pen to a glass pane and placing it in front of a camera while the operator rotated it, allowed the directors to mimic the floating movement seamlessly, giving the illusion of a floating pen to the audience. Why do US soldiers intentionally fight over a tiny red bottle? You see, out in the field, US soldiers would only get ready-to-eat foods for meals, and chewing them felt like chewing wet cardboard. So soldiers would fight over these tiny Tabasco bottles, as getting a hand on them meant adding a little flavor to their meal, making the cardboard meal a little bearable to eat. Why? Guards would forcefully put a handful of dry rice into the accused's mouth. They would then order the accused to chew and spit the rice out into a bowl for inspection. If the rice came out wet and full of saliva, the accused was proven innocent. But if the rice came out dry, it was believed the person's mouth dried up from fear, ultimately proving him to be guilty. Guards would Why did World War I machine gunners never aim at the enemy and only point their guns into the sky and fire? You see, this tactic is called beyond shooting, where commanders would calculate the firing angle in advance. Then the soldiers would fire into the sky all at once, making the bullets fire over obstacles or friendly troops and accurately hit hidden enemies. Why did World War I? If you see a hungry child outside of a snack shop, congratulations, you have just entered into a scam. Small kids in tourist area would act like they haven't eaten for days and ask you to buy a big food item from the snack shop. But the moment you give them a snack and leave, they immediately return the snack to the owner, earning them their sales commission. The best way to avoid this scam is to rip open the food packet and sit with the child until the food is finished. If you see a hungry child outside of a snack shop, congratulations.